Actually, should we rebrief him on where we're at?
If you don't mind.
If he plugs in.
I appreciate that if you don't mind.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely
Because
fine.
Leon is just, while he's setting up, I just might as well, do you mind if I plug him?
No,
Because
no worries.
you know content over everything, yeah? He's been recording here for a number of years now, and I only just chatting 2 weeks ago, I discovered he didn't even monetize his channel for the first 3 years, which means he came down here, he diligently filmed stuff, and he tries to be as objective. You getting this, Leon? Because I'm bigging you up. Okay.
I think you were very active 3 years ago, right? 4 years ago. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I remember now. Is your symbol that one? Yeah, it's the scribble. It makes that scribbling sound. All right, I got it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he tries
where
to be
have you
as...
been last couple of years? You sort of disappeared.
A break. The coach wants everyone to take a break.
Do you want to come on camera? I think you should give yourself a plug,
man.
honestly.
Yeah, I'd like to.
I want to make. Oh,
Can we hold for a minute?
I would be interested.
Yeah, well actually, while your camera's up, why don't we cover you for a minute? While they try and put these back
I
on.
don't really want to make it about me, man.
Well,
I like covering discussions that happen in people's corner.
look, if you really don't want to be on camera, fine. I just think that you really...
I don't mind. You can talk about what you want to talk about, but
Personally, I'd like to talk about you a bit because I think there are some very good people down here and you're one of the very best, and if that's not realised, it should be. That's all.
I'll be back.
Yeah, for sure. You and I could have a dialogue for a minute.
I'm recording here, so it's cool.
All right. What can I say? I think unbiased media that tries to objectively show both sides of an argument with respect to all parties is a very good thing, and this channel is a prime advocate of that with a long history of doing just that. So, all credit. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that, Tony.
Okay.
So what was the discussion you was having about?
I came over because I wanted to do determinism and compatibilism because I've been given a new view on it by a Muslim I was talking to, and think maybe there's a difference, a misunderstanding as to what's meant by determinism. Sabur is on the idea of scrolling, media scrolling, and the idea that being on the internet and just being on the internet all the time and just scrolling randomly through objective materialist stuff is kind of destroying our fitra and our soul, and you're better off pursuing a more religious path, and I'd agree with him on that. But then we're getting pretty metaphysical, particularly we're on right now the difference between truth and fact, definitions of truth, which really interests me. And we're trying to find our common ground. So we're agreeing on Fitra in principle as kind of a moral compass. We're agreeing that there are laws of nature, irrespective of how they were created, that there are default laws of nature. We're agreeing that human beings have a hardwired nature, so we're not postmodernists. Apart from that, I'm not sure I want to speak for him anymore till he gets back. So you might want to cut for a minute and see how it goes. So you can cut it. I think I said it was nice to see you, I haven't seen you for a while. I came across because I wanted to discuss compatibilism. You, however, have opened up with your agenda on this, which is scrolling. The idea that you're better off pursuing Islam and religion as a solution to scrolling and the deadening effect of the algorithm on people's psychology. I've concurred with you in the sense that I think if your options are scroll the algorithm or pursue the 5 pillars, yes, pursue the 5 pillars. Yeah? Where I think we disagree is that I think it's possible to pursue those virtues through other mediums and other religions as well, but I applaud Islam for providing that option. Yeah? Then we're moving on to a distinction of the nature of truth, and I'm trying to draw a difference between facts and truth, and that got interesting because it informs the entire debate. but these are the axiomic. So there are certain axiomic terms you want to define before you proceed. And how deep do you want to go on that? Can I quote Nietzsche? I think Nietzsche said that truth is like facts. He said facts are like coins which have lost their imprint. Yeah. He said they're reduced to base metals. In other words, the value of the object, the fact of the object, is not the point. The value of the thing is in the symbol which is attached to it. And that's how he drew a distinction. And I'm saying that value, I've defined, can I give my definition and then I'll shut up? I've defined truth as being that which optimizes hermeneutics in accordance with your Fitra, which you seem to think is a fairly...
No, I don't actually disagree that it's a good way of looking at the world in certain contexts. Like I mentioned, depression, right? It's very important for people to have a value-based system to get out of those circuits that they get into. But I think before we speak about facts and truth, let's go to knowledge. Okay, knowledge. Now, knowledge is something which, going back to the ancient Indus Valley civilization in India, or the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, they spoke about knowledge. So for a long time, knowledge was defined as something which you believe, something which is true, and something which is justified. So there's this three parts of knowledge, right? So this is a very well-established idea in philosophy about 2,000
I'm not sure I'd buy that, but go on.
Okay.
I think knowledge is what I believe I know. I'm not sure it has to be true. I think I can go through gradations of certainty.
So I'm giving you the historical account of the discussion.
Fine, I accept.
So what we basically had is this idea in Western philosophy was dominant, that knowledge is true justified belief. For you to know something, not only does it have to be true, you have to be justified in it, and you have to believe. You have to believe this particular thing. Now, if you say you look at a particular person and you believe that this person is from Latin America by their looks, okay? So you believe this person's from Latin America.
Sure.
You are justified because of looking at their facial features.
Sure.
And number three, it's true. So therefore Socrates or the later thinkers would say you have knowledge. Now someone came along in the 1960s, his name was Edmund Gettier. He was a very well-known philosopher. And he actually showed that even if these conditions are met, someone doesn't know. They can't say they know something. And he gave, we can give the example of a clock.
Yeah.
So someone can look at a clock and say, I believe it's 2 o'clock. I'm justified in believing it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it is true that it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it is 2 o'clock. They believe it's 2 o'clock, and they're justified because they looked at the clock.
Sure.
But it happens to be that the clock is broken, and it happens to be 2 o'clock by an accident. So the conditions are met, and you don't have knowledge.
If you've got a bet, no offense, do you have a better example? Because in that example, I'd say the statement, it is 2 o'clock, predicates on the assumption that the clock is dynamically doing its job.
But you
know
see,
what I mean?
but that assumption is not true in this particular case.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but it's phrased in such a way that, okay, never mind.
Okay, but look, this was Bertrand Russell's favorite example when it came to this particular point. Not favorite, I mean it's one of the examples that he used. So you get the point that conditions can be met, but we don't know. Now later on, what basically happened is, in philosophy, there was this discussion about how do we define knowledge? Because Gettier came along and he showed Gettier cases where conditions are met, but you can't actually have knowledge. Today, where we are at is that there isn't an agreed upon definition like there was in the past.
Agreed.
So we can give a Fitri answer to this, I believe, from an Islamic perspective. But before I give that, I want you to let me know what you think about knowledge. How would you define knowledge, and where are you at with this particular level? Like, where do you stand?
I define truth so far, what I'm working with. Knowledge, I think... So we're on epistemology. I think, as with all things, I'm going to sound Petersonian or whatever, it's about value hierarchies. So there is a value hierarchy of certainty, and knowledge sits on that value hierarchy. Yeah?
I agree.
Okay.
But I'm talking about the definition of knowledge. I'm not talking about the value of knowledge.
Well, I think knowledge is something which is a synonym for certainty, unless you're careful. And if you mean it as a synonym for certainty, then it occurs in degrees. If you mean it as a cognitive, intellectual statement, it's a slightly different thing. And
Sure.
You need to be very clear in which context you're using.
Yeah, but a residual question, if we don't take either of those parts, is, and this is what I was trying to get to. Prior to Gettier and him showing that these examples are wrong, justification was a key part of knowledge.
Sure.
Now, what I'm going to say is I believe justification is not required for knowledge. You can know something, but you don't need justification.
Hang on. I think I agree, and we may be heading in the same. Can I describe?
Sure.
Do you want to define for me your epistemic hierarchy, or can I define mine for you?
You can do yours.
Okay, my epistemic hierarchy would go at the bottom of the level of certainty. We have anecdotal information. Okay.
I'm just bringing my camera here. Just more straight here. But continue.
So I'm on my ego. I've actually got a bit of flow, and I want to get recorded now because I care about this stuff. I'd like to get it right. Thank you for the time. So on the epistemic hierarchy, at the bottom I think sits anecdotal evidence. In other words, somebody else tells you something. Yes. One level up from that, and I'm using all of these simultaneously to determine what's true. One level up from that is empirical. What's actually coming in directly. So if somebody tells me anecdotally there's nobody at Speaker's Corner at the moment, but my empirical evidence is telling me there is, then the empirical evidence trumps the anecdotal evidence, yes? We agree? Okay. The next level up from that, I would say, is inferential, where I start using syllogism of deduction, induction, and logic to try and further my understanding of what's true, and I do that on the basis of on the axiomatic assumption I live in a self-consistent universe. So what I'm looking for is harmony and non-contradiction. Plato's principle of non-contradiction. Yeah.
Sure. Can I just ask a question at this point? Why have you not mentioned analytical already? Because to do inferential, you would need some analytics.
I'm taking analytics to be within the inference, I think, if I'm understanding your term. So empirical is just what my senses are hitting me with,
look,
yeah?
I don't disagree with you with anecdotal, empirical, but I think the next level should be analytical.
Which I take to be inferential. That's what I mean by
but what I mean by analytical is inferential is inference, right? So it could be, you could have inductive and deductive arguments. What I mean is analytical statements.
As opposed to synthetic statements?
Yes.
Okay, analytical statements, my understanding is analytical statements are statements like the billiard ball is round, yes? Which the word feels, it seems to me that's just a descriptive empirical statement. I don't know why they put the label analytical on it. Analytical to me means you're chopping things up and thinking. Synthetic apparently means deducing, inferring certain predictions about how the billiard ball will act. And so I think that, to me, the word analytical seems better. So the labels themselves I find counterintuitive, but what the hell? So by empirical, analytical and empirical are the same within our framework, aren't they?
I would say analytical is more certain. Because you're dealing with, say, pure mathematics would be analytical. But when you're dealing with...
then it's not empirical.
No, it's not empirical. Empirical is lower.
Why isn't mathematics within inference? Why isn't it within induction, deduction?
So yeah, that's a good question. But it is within deduction, but it's not within induction. So you don't need. You have one apple, another apple, and therefore you have two apples. You don't need to keep checking two objects to know 1 + 1 is 2. That is true a priori. It's true before experience, right? We're not really disagreeing. What I'm trying to get to is that...
We're not. I'm aware I've seen a video of yours where you said something very interesting to me, which was, I don't believe in propositions from induction, only from deduction. I think you said...
No, I said I take deduction over induction.
Right, which raises a whole fascinating topic in itself, but go on.
Yeah, so we're really we're really not disagreeing when it comes to the hierarchy so far.
So far we're good?
But so far we're good.
Okay,
But what I would
well
say...
then I'll go above it.
Sure.
And above that, I think we have what you might be alluding to, which is instinctive knowledge. I know I'm in pain if I'm in pain. I don't need inference, I don't need rationality. I get hit by primary experience, yeah? That is a certainty. So the one thing I know for sure is I am, yeah? It occurs at that level of instinct. Everything else is up for grabs.
Sure.
It can't be, in the epistemology, things I think I know by any other mechanism are always open for revision. But the certainty of cognitive experience and phenomenological quality is undeniable, and that's my prime axiom, yeah? Would you agree with that axiom?
I would agree, but I wouldn't say it's the prime necessarily.
Okay.
I would say there's something even higher than that.
Wow.
There's something even higher than sensation. So you can have someone who is...
I'm not saying it's sensation, I'm saying in terms of certainty.
Oh.
The thing I can be most certain of in that hierarchy is I am experiencing.
Sure.
Experience is occurring, yes?
Sure. Experience is occurring. That is, I think you should separate that from the sensation of pain, say. Because I think you can have a dream in which you're getting a pain,
Yeah.
but that isn't actually in reality. So you could actually subcategorize those two things rather than putting them in the same category. The highest form of certainty is knowledge that does not require justification, and me as a Muslim, I would say that is belief in God, belief in morals, and our instinct telling us that certain things are true.
Damn, well, now we actually really disagree. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm afraid we do. I think
There's no problem.
I think you put at the very top of the tree a very complicated analytical mechanism which we have to explore and is an important tool, but I think it's a mistake to put it at the top. I think my instinctive certainty of qualia is the single thing I can be most certain about, and all of my other inferences arise naturally from that, including your assumption, your correct or incorrect assumption that the more complicated analytical statements you made are true. They may or may not be true, but they predicate on I am. If you are not, there's no chance that what you just said is the case.
Yeah, but when it comes to, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Descartes' way of solving this was God.
He included God in it, but I mean, with hindsight, if you look at it, I could argue you don't need the God thing. I'm not beholden to Descartes. I'm standing on the merits of I am experiences.
Okay, no.
And I think
so you stop there.
I think it's better to say I feel, therefore I am. So I think Descartes made it over rational. I think I'm always feeling, maybe I'm not always thinking, but I'm always feeling. And if you want to get cosmic about it, I think the fact that the name of God means I am, therefore I am, certainly in the Hebrew tradition, may be very significant. The fact that God's name happens to translate as almost the axiomic statement of certainty that everybody will always be able to make possibly isn't a coincidence.
That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure where to go with that because
Just let it breathe.
Yeah, no.
It would be entirely appropriate that the most important name or the most important thing in the cosmos would happen to be the axiomic certainty that would be true for all people for all time.
The thing is, I've never seen it connected that way. So the way you've connected it there, it's just opening up some possibilities in my mind. That, okay,
good.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So that shows you think about this quite often.
I'm a lot for a long time.
Okay, I can see that.
I can
see that. So I can't comment on that, but that's interesting. When it comes to my hierarchy,
Yeah.
we agree on pretty much everything. Of course, we disagree at the top, but at the top, the way I see it is God is the lens which allows us to make sense of any form of reality. That's my first and primary most important thing, which is why, did you see the discussion between Muhammad Hijab and Peterson?
Yeah, just quickly, we'll go there. That what you just said seemed to align with my definition of truth,
Right.
which is that it optimizes hermeneutics, which is the same thing as you just said, isn't it?
I'm saying something slightly different.
Say it again.
What I'm saying is, God. Okay, I see what you think.
I'm saying
that.
The word God and truth almost become interchangeable.
Yeah, well,
according to our definitions, which seems like a good thing.
Well, in Islam, the name of God is the truth.
Okay.
That is actually God's name,
Okay.
Al-Haq, the truth.
Sure.
So we even have poetry that everything besides God is in vain. Everything besides God is basically not true. Right? Even the most basic statement in Islam, the Shahada, the first part of it, La ilaha illallah. that the first part is a total negation, absolute negation of everything. And then the affirmation of God being the only one worthy of worship, the only, if you like, the true value.
Yeah.
The true thing that we should be trying to reach in life, right? So when it comes to God, I see why you're saying that it's an epistemic, it's epistemically, practically
It's an
useful.
epistemically, absolutely inevitable statement of truth for all people for all time.
Yes.
Therefore, it's profoundly important.
Yeah. I would add, and as a Muslim, that it's not just that it's metaphorically useful, it is absolutely true. That's the difference.
Yeah.
between
No,
the two.
I'm with you as well. That's why truth happens within subjective experience. It's it's a qualitative thing. It's a value thing. Anyway, sorry. Whoa. Carry on.
So I wanted to link this to the conversation between Muhammad Hijab and Peterson,
Yeah.
and then Peterson and Dawkins, because this shows.
I haven't seen Dawkins one yet. I only heard about it.
Okay, but I'll summarize
Okay.
what the issue was. So in the beginning of the discussion between Hijab and Peterson, Hijab was speaking about the beliefs that we have in Islam, and then he also mentioned an argument for God's existence. And Peterson was not really interested. He was more like,
Because Peterson said, quote, why do you use propositional logic?
Yes.
And at that point, the conversation took a tangent.
yes.
And I've got to say, being honest, I wish it hadn't, but I mean, it's a tangent that can be taken. I just wish it maybe hadn't happened at that point in their meeting. Yeah?
Sure.
But it did, and you're right, it's interesting that propositional logic has limitations, would agree.
Yeah, of course. So then Peterson spoke about how his problem with new atheists, people like Dawkins,
Yeah.
is that they make God into a proposition, right? That is something to be proven or disproven.
Yeah.
Now, from the Islamic perspective, and I think Hijab did a good job in trying to explain this, is that we believe you don't need to prove God's existence. We believe that it's something innate, something is true, is something that's fitri. Yet we still believe that you can use rational arguments to show that God exists. So we believe in both, right?
Yeah, I think for me it works like this. Intellect and rationality is amoral. It is not a moral quality. It's not a spiritual quality. You can be very analytical.
Say that again.
It's not a moral quality.
No, before that. You said
I said
rationality is
rationality is amoral. It doesn't mean immoral. It just means it
Amoral.
operates in the world of facts. It's morally and value neutral, okay? Moral qualities are things like honesty, empathy, courage. These are the spiritual virtues. And the analytical tool is just there to help you. I'd say it's a metaphor, it's like climbing a mountain, yeah? There's a moral mountain to climb. You're only going to climb the moral mountain using courage, empathy, strength, etc., yes? The moral virtues. You use the analytical tool just to help you to work around the obstacles, yes? But if you only use the analytical tool, you won't climb the mountain. You'll just sit at the bottom of the mountain going, oh, there's a problem. So it's a very, very secondary tool, and it shouldn't be overrated.
Just before we carry on there's a verse of the Quran I wanted to bring out on my phone, but I'm going to paraphrase the meaning of it.
Okay.
It's that God says the worst people essentially are those who do not reason. So people who do not value rationality, if you like, people who do not use rationality, them being in a way immoral, that's an inference you can make from that particular verse. So are you saying that rationality in of itself intrinsically is amoral?
I'm saying it's amoral and it's a tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool.
But if somebody doesn't use it, would
Yeah.
you say that they are immoral? Because I believe they are immoral.
No, there I don't, because I'm basically mystic and more Sufi, Kabbalistic. I think the primary level of certainty is mystical. It's just I am, and it's beyond rationality.
Sure. No, I understand what you're trying to get to, but I'm asking something different. I'm saying if somebody refuses to use their reason and they want to just follow blindly their culture or their desire or something that's in their self-interest, I would say that that's immoral because they're not valuing rationality.
I would say I'd agree with you. They're falling short of their fitra because their potential is to use their good tools.
Okay,
and
so
it's
we
a good
agree.
tool. Yeah. So use the tool, but understand the limitations of the tool.
Yeah.
I don't ever expect to cognitively know the truth, the absolute truth. I assume, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, that it's beyond my limited monkey brain, okay? And that God is above and beyond my cognition ultimately and is mystical. So so respect the tool but know its limits. And its limits seem to be clear from, for example, Hume's fallacy of induction, which I've heard Muhammad Hijab mention, which is totally true. So we need to understand that all of our beliefs, even if you're a scientist, ultimately are based on faith. You have to make a statement of faith before you can build an intellectual, moral, cognitive hierarchy.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've got Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which makes it clear exactly the same thing in mathematics. And then you've got what's going on in quantum physics, which just goes, okay, common sense ain't going to work here, yeah? So all of those things tell you there's a boundary condition on knowledge, which is why in conservative Islam, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're overvaluing that kind of cognitive knowledge. It's not the most powerful tool, and it's not a moral tool.
So it's not the most powerful, but it is a tool which God has given us.
Agreed, but you just put it at the top of the hierarchy.
No, I didn't put it at the top. The top in my hierarchy was our Fitra.
I thought you said knowledge. I'd agree with you with Fitra.
Yeah.
Okay, Fitra's at the top? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing towards everything should aim. It's like a compass
No,
point.
it's not where it aims. The Fitra allows you to see the rest of the world. So rationality wouldn't function unless you had the Fitra. Now, I just want to make a little point here. We usually, when we talk about I think, therefore I am, and going back to these initial propositions, we speak about Descartes. But Descartes, we can argue, took this from Ghazali. Because Ghazali, I'm sure you're aware of...
I don't know, I'm very badly read, you'd be surprised. Who's Ghazali?
Ghazali was one of the most well-known Islamic jurists, scholars, philosophers in history. So he existed before Descartes. Many of his writings, actually, because remember, the Islamic world was more advanced than Europe, and then Europe got that through the Renaissance. So many of his teachings and writings you will find in enlightened thinkers, right? So one of them is in regards to this. So there's a lot of resonance between the writings of Descartes, who came later, and Ghazali. The difference being, Ghazali, in terms of his spiritual writings and his sort of belief in God, he articulates himself in a more coherent way than Descartes. And I think that's what I'm trying to, those are some of the arguments I'm trying to elucidate.
How about I just take your word?
Okay. Why not?
I think, you know, I think...
You should look up his writings.
I think whatever's true is true and whatever's good is good, and to an extent to me, whatever culture or history it comes from is secondary. I don't, you know, whether it was from whichever tradition, the Western or Islamic, if it's good, it's good. And I'm sure that the Islamic tradition has contributed a huge amount. And it carried the Aristotelian tradition for the West when we hit the Dark Ages, so thank you. But, you know, reality for me is now the here and now. Yeah. And I think the religious, the spiritual journey is an individual one of one-to-one with God, not a collective tribal thing. So I'm not taking any credit or discredit for what my tribe's done. I'm responsible for me.
Well, in Islam, it does teach you that rather than following your society, you will be accountable yourself.
Yeah.
So there is that.
I'm being judged on my personal moral choices. I'm not responsible for other people.
You're not, but you do have a responsibility of enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong.
Yeah. I'm entangled with other people, but that my other people are secondary to my primary. If there's a God as you envisage him, he'll be asking me how I conducted my life on Judgment Day based on my choices, not what members of my tribe did.
Yeah. I mean, it's mainly about an individual responsibility that you actually have. So we're not really disagreeing on much.
This is good.
This is good,
because
but sometimes
too much disagreement down there. We can start disagreeing if you wish, but I have areas I'd like to investigate.
Yeah, there are areas I'd like to investigate. I actually wanted to grab a coffee, and I had a conversation to actually get. I'm going to be coming next week, so we can have a disagreement if you want next week.
Okay.
Because agreement's good, but it's also good to get into which points we disagree on, because I think fundamentally I want to try and convince you. Now, I know you don't like preaching, I know you don't like, okay, but I want to try and convince people that I meet that when it comes to Allah, when it comes to God, it's not just that it's metaphorically useful, it's pragmatic. It is absolutely true. I know you don't like absolutes, but that's...
No, I do like absolutes. My driving instinct is to try and find my assumption and hope is that religion is driving towards absolute truth, and that the absolute true and the absolute good and the absolute meaningfulness are synonymous. So teleology, morality, and ontology are all just synced in the same beautiful precision. So it's very monistic, yeah? So I absolutely am aiming for absolute truth. I'm hoping it's possible, absolute moral truth. I'm just not going to commit to the certainty that it's the case. So I'm using modal logic.
You're not going to commit yet. You don't know whether you may commit in the future.
I think I'm morally obliged to be honest. I think honesty is a virtue. And if I'm going to be intellectually honest and I'm going to believe in a self-consistent universe, when I see inconsistencies, I have to respond to them. So I'm not 100% committed. And also I already know from Gödel's and completely theorem in Hume, I can't know anything 100% for sure anyway. So everything in terms of my beliefs has to be slightly contingent. But I work with the best odds. All you can do is play the best odds. And I look at the best odds I can and then modify them as realistically and honestly as I can.
But
I think that's my pitch.
I think I spoke to you about this before. There are certain absolutes there. There are certain absolutes that you can't be, for example, experience. The fact that you are experiencing reality.
That to me is an absolute.
Yeah, that's an absolute. Also that truth is intrinsically valuable. That's an absolute.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
It's
So
intrinsically It's intrinsically valuable to any given individual. I don't think what I can't do is I don't think it's possible to make statements of absolute moral certainty as propositional generalities. For example, thou shalt not steal. Okay? I think all religions, not just Islam, have a problem with this, and it's a contextual problem, which is I don't think it's always objectively true that you shouldn't steal. There are given scenarios in which maybe you should steal. So although as a general rule it's excellent, it's meant to be interpreted as a general rule. And
Okay,
that the moral absolutes only ground down at the individual level. That's when the absolute comes into play. You're not going to get an
but it's important to make a distinction here, which is that Islam doesn't say thou shalt not steal is an absolute. It doesn't say, like for example, things in some of the other commandments, like thou shalt not take a life, right?
Yeah.
Islam doesn't say that those things are absolute. When it comes to only God is worthy of worship, Islam will say, yeah, that's absolute. But the reason why it wouldn't say the other things are absolute is because of what you said.
Good.
Is that there's certain conditions within which a person has to take someone's life. If you could have somebody who's about to take Hitler's life, which will save the lives of millions of people.
Exactly.
Do you understand?
Yeah, no, we totally agree. Because I've heard Muhammad Hijab say, we say that these rules are objective, but they're not absolute. Yeah. And I'm instinctively hunting for the absolute, because under the bonnet of this, presumably there are absolutes, and I think the absolutes occur when you ground it out at the level of the individual.
But the absolute, even within the Ten Commandments, like I mentioned, is that there's none worthy of worship except God. Meaning nothing should have your absolute fear, love, and hope except the Creator.
I need to think about that more, because literally walking to the park today, my initial assumption was generalized propositional statements can't be absolute, but I'm starting to suspect that only applies to negative assertions, things you shouldn't do. But it might be possible to make absolute positive assertions because they're aspirational to an ideal, yeah?
Yeah, but you can, I think, make it with negative statements too, because you can say you should never worship anyone besides God.
So
that's a negation.
Okay, I wouldn't agree with that one, and here we now. If you've got to go, this is a debate. Let's return to these points. I'm deep.
It's great
Loved
speaking
it.
to
It's
you.
really good to see you. Really.
I haven't seen you in a while. You're taking care of yourself.
I
as
had
well.
to go away for a couple of years, and I've had
You look like you have a bit of a
stuff.
tan as well.
Yeah, it's really nice, and I'm glad that you're back. You haven't been around.
Do you want to grab a coffee just before I have another conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do that.
Grab your
Hang on a minute.